Hello, I am the Unfeeling. Today I would like to ask a simple question. What is feminism? Or at least, what is feminism today? I ask because we will get very different answers depending on the source. To some, it is a movement that fights for equality for women. For others, it is a movement that fights for equality for all. But still, for what seems like a rising group, feminism is a hate movement that doesn't fight for equality, but for totalitarian control of our political and social lives. To them, feminism is a movement that fights for nothing but power over others that disagrees with them. I am an observer that has already formed my own opinion of what feminism is, but admittedly, it came from the guidance of others. Today, I would like to wipe the slate clean and try to find out for myself, as if I had never heard of feminism before. I will try to keep my own bias out of it as much as I can, and demonstrate what feminism is all about in this modern era. This series will examine a few articles from the top 10 feminist blogs, according to TakePart.com. Each video in this series will focus on one blog at a time to keep the videos from being too long. There are many branches of feminism, and I'm sure that if I were to focus on one, someone would comment, claiming I should look at the other because it's the real feminism. I'm not interested in finding the best form of feminism. I only want to see what is the most common and what the average person would come across if they were to look into feminism as a general term. So to understand what feminism is to the average person, I decided to simply Google top feminist websites. It led me to TakePart.com, which lists the top 10 feminist blogs. The first on the list is Feministing, which says,
Feministing believes that young women are rarely given the opportunity to speak on their own behalf on issues that affect their lives and futures. Feministing provides a platform for us to comment, analyze and influence.
While I can't really recall an instance within my lifetime where young women weren't legally given opportunities to speak their minds, while young men could, let's check out their website to see what they have to say. Looks like they're a normal blog site. Reading from the Daily Feminist cheat sheet, I don't see anything wrong. Of course some would point out Alexandra Brodsky and Elizabeth Deutsch on how Title VII of the Civil Rights Act could overturn Hobby Lobby would be a cause for alarm, but I'll check that out later. Right now, let's check out their About section just to get an idea of what kind of site this is.
Community standards. Feministing is an online community for feminists and their allies. The community aspect of Feministing, our community blog, campus blog, comment threads, and related social networking sites, exist to better connect feminists online and off, and to encourage activism. We hope that the Feministing community will provide a forum for a variety of feminist voices and organizations. In order to maintain a progressive and safe discourse on the site, anti-feminist comments, posts, and profiles are not permitted. The Feministing editors believe that racism, classism, ableism, homophobia, transphobia, and hate speech constitute anti-feminism and have no place on the site. If you have a concern about a commenter or blogger, please let us know using the report button.
So far it doesn't sound bad at all. While I personally am not one to censor comments, I can understand why they wouldn't want those listed things on their site.
Comments policy. Feministing comment threads are spaces to further feminist conversations and ideas. Please read our comments policy carefully before contributing to the site. All comments from new users are held. Once users have commented on several posts in a productive manner, they may be trusted by the community moderator to have their comments post automatically. This privilege is solely given out at the discretion of the community moderator.
I haven't had much experience with these kinds of sites, so maybe this is something that is normal. After all, I can understand why they would take such measures if they want to ensure they don't get spam or trolls on their sites. Let's continue.
There is enough hate and oppression out there in the real world. We don't need any extra of it here.
Not sure how one would oppress someone on the internet, but whatever. Moving on.
While we can't guarantee a completely safe space on Feministing, we can strive for an accountable space. And though we love differences of opinion, there's a way to disagree respectfully and thoughtfully. We expect civility, respect, and patience for your fellow readers and for this space. Please remember that we are all here to grow and learn from each other.
This sounds like a reasonable expectation from their users.
what isn't tolerated, and if you're unsure, are on the side of caution, blaming the victim, fat-shaming, racist, sexist, ageist, transphobic, sizist, ableist, homophobic commentary, plain malice, that is, comments that don't further the dialogue, but instead just harshly imply to writer that they need to educate themselves or that they are stupid, and personal attacks. Even if most of your comment is constructive, if the last line is "so thanks for that, asshole," we will probably not post it. Dismissal, silencing, that is, anything along lines of "I don't think that matters too much" or "this isn't an issue."
I was with them until plain malice. It's not that I'm pro-malice, but it's how they explained that just having an insult at the end of a comment is enough to not have the comment posted. I can understand not wanting users to feel insulted and all, but the way they phrase it seems like minor things can prevent users from having their comments posted. Even the dismissal seems kind of odd. Claiming something isn't a issue is enough to have comments blocked and isn't tolerated. Doesn't sound like they love differences of opinions if the opinion is that the article is a waste of energy and not a big issue. It almost sounds like they're telling their readers that whatever issues they raise are important for no reason at all other than they raised them.
Questioning the feminist validity of a topic or post, that is, why do you care about this? You should really care about X, Y, Z because it's more important.
I take back what I said. Now it's starting to sound like groupthink. If someone is raising a minor issue, wouldn't it be valid to address it as unimportant, especially if there were more pressing things to be concerned with? If I were complaining that the great injustice of today was that the man that used to sell ice cream is no longer serving our neighborhood, but at the same time, the police had killed 3 innocent people down the street and were actually rewarded for it, wouldn't it be valid to tell me that I should be focusing on the police and not the ice cream? That really sounded like a "don't question us" moment, and the fact that they used the words questioning the feminist validity really isn't helping either.
Derailing, anything way off topic or leads the discussion in a completely different and unproductive from the original post. Keep in mind this is not an exhaustive list, and that any of these issues can manifest in different, and sometimes, subtle, ways. Ultimately, it is up to the Feministing team whether a comment gets posted or not.
Something seems a little off. I can understand what they're trying to do, but it seems like when they said any of these issues can manifest in different and sometimes subtle ways, it allows them to be vague. I'm naturally a bit of a cynic and I can definitely see how the Feministing team could abuse such a system if they so desired. But there's something else that caught my eye, found in their frequently asked questions.
You erased my comment, banned me / won't let me post on the community site. Isn't that censoring? No, this is a feminist site whose purpose is to further feminist dialogue in a progressive manner. If you aren't contributing to that end, if you're derailing a thread, making personal attacks or trolling, we will erase your comments and possibly ban you from the site. Our site, our rules.
Again, it comes off almost like groupthink, but I know that within a group, some moderation must be used. Legally speaking, they have every right to do this. It is their private website and they can dictate what goes on it to this extent. However, if we look at the definition of censorship, we can clearly see that is what they are engaging in.
Censorship is the suppression of speech, public communication or other information which may be considered objectionable, harmful, sensitive, politically incorrect or inconvenient as determined by governments, media outlets, authorities or other such entities. Governments, private organizations and individuals may engage in censorship. Censorship may be direct or it may be indirect, in which case it is called soft censorship. It occurs in a variety of different media, including speech, books, music, films, and other arts, the press, radio, television, and the Internet for a variety of claimed reasons including national security, to control obscenity, child pornography, and hate speech, to protect children or other vulnerable groups, to promote or restrict political or religious views, and to prevent slander and libel.
So yes, it is a form of censorship. I'm not saying they're wrong for doing it, but at least call it what it is and explain why they approve of it within a certain context. But all in all, these are just minor issues that I have. There's nothing particularly alarming with what I've found so far on Feministing. The group thinks stuff could possibly be just the way they worded their policies, and not how they are in practice. So let's check out some of the articles. The Hobby Lobby article in the Daily Feminist Cheat Sheet is actually an eternal link to a website called Bloomberg View. The article claims that Hobby Lobby is discriminating against women by denying contraceptives, since it's featured on Feministing as a cheat sheet. Obviously they agree with it.
In Burwell vs. Hobby Lobby, an all-male U.S. Supreme Court majority granted exemptions to closely held corporations that refuse to offer contraceptive coverage in employee health plans. In response, many have thrown up their hands, asking, why should women have any faith in the law if it can't even protect us from this? But here's the thing, it does. Employers who single out contraceptives as undeserving of coverage don't only violate ethical expectations of gender equality, they also violate federal anti-discrimination law.
That seems to be the gist of what people have to say about the decision, that it's such horrible discrimination against women, and Hobby Lobby is denying contraceptives to their female employees. The Justicar has a video, clearly laying out the legal issues with this case and why it's being blown out of proportion. The link to the video is in the description. Overall, it's very misleading to say it's discrimination. Hobby Lobby provides 16 out of 20 mandated contraceptives. They believe the other 4 to be akin to abortion. Whether or not that's true isn't actually relevant to the case. It's about whether or not the government has the authority to force this corporation to cover contraceptives the owners disagree with because of their religious beliefs. Keep in mind, this is a privately owned company, not a publicly open business people tend to think of when they hear corporation. If Hobby Lobby had stock opened to the public with many investors, it's likely the decision would have gone the other way. From my understanding of the situation, in the public discourse, it seems as though many people, including Alexandra Brodsky and Elizabeth Deutsch, the authors of this article, are in the mindset that women can only get contraceptives through their employers. That's simply not the case. It amazes me that people want the responsibility of purchasing certain goods or services to be either on the government or businesses instead of the private citizens that want these things, as if they couldn't pay for them on their own. This is just a general concept, but it does come off as they're demanding to have others pay for things they want for themselves. Don't get me wrong. This is a problem I have with a lot of people, not just feminists and progressives. Anyway, back to feministing. I found this article about Jews and Arabs being in relationships and expressing their love. I was pleased to see this article, to be honest, because of the positive message. However, once I had read it, a couple things stuck out to me. The first was this.
Amidst the violence and bloodshed happening literally as you read this blog, some Jews and Arabs are showing that these two groups do not have to be enemies. Tragically, sexual violence is often used as a tool of war. Recently, in fact, an Israeli scholar and sitting professor actually said, out loud, during an interview, that the only way to deter Palestinian terrorism was through rape. A terrorist, like those who kidnapped the boys and killed them, the only thing that will deter them is if they know that either their sister or mother will be raped if they are caught. This is the only thing that deters a suicide bomber. If he knows that when he pulls the trigger, or blows himself up, his sister will be raped. That's it. That's the only thing that will bring him back home, to keep the honor of his sister. This is the culture of the Middle East. I didn't create it, but this is the situation.
With an article like this, it's important to discuss the current tension in the Middle East, but why must they specifically bring up rape like this? Also, the way Katie Halper worded this piece is very odd. Instead of saying the threat of rape to a terrorist's loved ones were the only thing deterring terroristic actions, Ms. Halper worded in a way that sounded like feministing is encouraging rape. She could have easily gotten her point across by saying, the thing deterring Palestinian terrorism was threats of rape of their sisters and mothers, instead of, the only way to deter Palestinian terrorism was through rape. But again, why rape is being brought up in this article at all is a mystery to me. The article gets to the point and discusses about how and why this trend has started.
The social media campaign was started by 2 students at Hunter College in New York City, 2 weeks ago. Abraham Gutman, who is Israeli, and Dania Darwish, who is Syrian, didn't come up with the phrase, but they helped make it international and viral. Gutman says, The campaign exists in a sense in Israel. The slogan has been alive for years in Hebrew. We wanted to use that same slogan, to strengthen it, to show the international community that we don't have to be enemies. Gutman laments that the tone online and on social media is harsher and people are using more violent words. We wanted to produce a voice that counters that. We can disagree, but we must be able to diffuse the hate.
I fully support what they're doing and what they're going for. But it is the second thing that stuck out to me. Are the people that are actively participating in this trend actually living in Middle Eastern countries? It would make a big difference. It's one thing to be doing this while living inside those countries with such cultural tension, and completely different to be doing it in a Western country that doesn't have that issue. While it is a good thing to show the world that not all Jews and Arabs hate each other, it doesn't really do anything to ease the tension between the governments. It's not like they're going to see couples of their two ethnicities and say, "Hey, what are we fighting for?" Our people don't care. They see each other as people and love one another. I support breaking down stereotypes when it comes to people's assumptions of other groups, but I can't help but think of a quote from Justice League of America, number 7.4, and your Twitter feed fills up with sympathetic responses from people across the world who do nothing to help. It's a quote I think of almost every time I see this age of activism within our current culture. So far, it had seemed everything was pretty okay on Feministing. I didn't agree with how things were presented or with their positions on certain issues, but I didn't see anything of the crazy feminist stereotype. That is, until I saw an article written by Jo. To tell the truth, as I was reading this article, I became very curious about the author. The more I looked into her, the more I realized I'm going to have to do a separate video of her. She has a habit of overreacting, overanalyzing, and using buzzwords, as this article will demonstrate.
When Jared Leto won a Golden Globe and then an Oscar for playing a caricature of a transgender woman in Dallas Buyers Club, I witnessed so much cis-mansplaining about how Leto's performance and award show appearances were good for trans women, because we needed visibility. Lots of folks don't know about trans people, they argued, and Leto was educating them, plus his performance wasn't that bad. It was accurate to how trans women were seen by these cis men. At that time, when Laverne Cox made the cover of Time, Andrew Sullivan responded by arguing that trans people should be willing to talk about our genitals when asked because people need to be educated, as if continuing to focus on our crotches instead of the rest of our lives would somehow be a positive thing, because all visibility is good.
I completely agree that a transgender person's genitals shouldn't really be a focus, or even be discussed in a professional interview. I know that people would be curious about someone's plumbing, but that's something that should be talked about in private and only when they're comfortable enough to talk about it on their own terms. You wouldn't ask someone about their erectile dysfunction and then argue men with that condition should be willing to talk about it, would you? Now, because I mentally wiped the slate clean of feminism, I decided to look up cis, which led me to this entry of Wikipedia that read, "Cisgender and cissexual, often abbreviated to simply cis, describe related types of gender identity, where individuals' experiences of their own gender match the sex they were assigned at birth." Okay, sounds simple enough, but what about mansplaining? Wikipedia states it as a portmanteau of the words man and explaining that describes the act of a man speaking to a woman with the assumption that she knows less than he does about the topic being discussed on the basis of her gender. In 2010 it was named by the New York Times as one of its words of the year. Mansplaining is different from other forms of condescension because mansplaining is rooted in the assumption that, in general, a man is likely to be more knowledgeable than a woman. That's certainly an interesting word. But in the context of Joe's article, I don't see it being applied to a man thinking he's more knowledgeable because he's a man. If anything, it would seem as though Joe disagrees with them because perhaps they are ignorant on the subject, instead of them believing they are superior sources about the topic at hand. But that's just the beginning.
Visibility is not necessarily a good thing, particularly for trans women. We are often hypervisible, cis-patriarchy's convenient punching bag. We walk around constantly aware that we could get clocked, or recognized as trans, by someone who might target us with harassment or violence. And some visibility is deadly. So we should be thoughtful about how we prioritize visibility in trans politics. We need to be able to differentiate between negative and positive visibility, between humanization and dangerous stereotypes.
I agree with her point. Not all publicity is good publicity, as it can lead to serious misconceptions and even some negative stereotypes. However, it's her language within it that I find alarming. We are often hypervisible, cis-patriarchy's convenient punching bag. Now, I haven't really met that many transgendered people, and I'll talk about the ones I have with my next point, but it's clear that Joes wants the reader to believe that transgendered women are systematically oppressed because they're not cis and they're not men. I have yet to actually witness anything credible about that kind of treatment, where trans are treated less than human simply for being trans. And anyone with a brain should be able to see we don't live in a patriarchy. When we have females in high positions of companies and government, no one is excluding women from anything, and we have laws against such action. We even have laws stating certain areas must have a certain amount of women. Ironically, if women wanted to create something that was only for women and no men were allowed, our society wouldn't have a problem with it. In fact, they would embrace it and see it as a place for women to be safe from men. So we're closer to a matriarchy than a patriarchy, but we don't live in either.
A lot of supposed visibility of trans women is really just the perpetuation of tired stereotypes. I didn't understand that it was possible for me to exist when I was a kid because none of the representations of trans women I saw were humanizing or really possible to identify with. I saw salacious clips on daytime shows and offensive jokes on Arrested Development. In fact, I can't think of a single sitcom I've watched that didn't include at least one offensive joke at the expense of trans women.
I find it kind of odd that Joes is expressing that she didn't know she could exist because media didn't tell her so. I don't think most people would say they learned about themselves because of some entertainment or even mainstream media explained who and what they are to them. No one can tell you who or what you are, within reason. If you are biologically a male, but feel you are a female, then you are trans. However, if you are human, but feel you are a Japanese turtle, then you should probably stop using Tumblr and seek professional help. My point being, you shouldn't be relying on media to form your identity, nor should you be relying on it to give you something to represent you. If it's really that important to you, do it yourself. Don't rely on others to do it for you. Also, I can't think of a single sitcom I've watched that didn't include at least one offensive joke at the expense of trans women. Really? Not a single one? That seems extremely odd. Either we really do have an epidemic of comedy slandering trans women, or Joe's here is pretty histrionic.
A lot of it was about men pretending to be women, tricking straight men into sex, or jokes about genitals, but none of it had anything to do with the gender issues I was going through. These weren't representations of what it's really like to be trans, but stereotypes being fed to me by media makers who had themselves learned these stereotypes from trans misogynist media and culture. If anything, these negative representations made being myself seem even less possible, since they were so dehumanizing.
Oh. So it was Joe's being histrionic. Look, Joe's, I don't know what you go through as a trans woman, and whatever it is, I'm sure it's as horrible as everyone else when they're trying to figure out their identities as they got older. It's certainly not a unique problem. We pretty much all go through it. However, I can't help but notice, you've equated cross-dressing with transgender. From my understanding, they're not exactly the same thing. Sure, some transgendered women cross-dress to look like women in their daily lives. But there are also men out there that do it as a sexual fetish. If anything, it would be more about the latter than transgendered women, don't you think? And about the sitcoms themselves, men pretending to be women is an old comedy gag. No harm really to anyone because it's supposed to be something the man is uncomfortable with, but is in a situation where it was deemed necessary. Or perhaps he's known for being quirky and does outlandish things all the time. It's not meant to say, hey, this is what those weird fags do. It has nothing to do with your group. It seems to me that you had issues with your identity growing up, and because you may have felt alienated for being outside the norm, you have deemed that entertainment and media has it out for you and other transgendered people. I said I was going to expand on the transgendered women I've met in my life, and this is what I was saving it for. I have only knowingly met a handful of transgendered women, all of whom have hit on me. Every one of them that I knew were transgendered tried to sleep with me and a few of my male friends. No, not at the same time. Only one of them had the decency to tell me up front before actually trying to hook up. As for the others, it wasn't until the conversation had gotten a bit more flirtatious did they actually stop and say something along the lines of, "I need to let you know something though. It's only been 4 transgendered women I can remember, so I know I may just have had a unique experience. I know from the fact that all 4 were able to pass off as biologically female that it's already a rare occurrence. I didn't bring it up to paint all transgendered women this way. I actually did it just to say that it does in fact happen and there's nothing wrong with comedy making light of those situations where straight men find out she's actually a transgendered woman. The thing about these comedy routines playing a joke on men, having a transgendered woman try to trick them into sex, is that it isn't meant as an insult to transgendered women. It's actually making fun of the man. It's a way of saying, aha, you had no idea you were hitting on someone with a penis. What? You're gay now. Now let it be known that you like dick in your ass, you fairy. Because they're straight men. The situation is embarrassing and implying homosexuality is not saying there's something wrong with it, only making fun of the fact that a straight man doesn't identify as gay. It would be like saying a woman looks manly. She wouldn't be offended because there's something wrong with being a man. She would be offended because she doesn't identify as one. That's the joke. One doesn't have to find it funny, but at least understand the meaning behind it. Joes goes on to discuss how trans women are murdered, and how the media acts as if these women had it coming because of this big conspiracy against transgendered people. But that's a topic for another day. I will make a video about Joes and her articles after I finish going through the top feminist blogs. And considering that Joes is a large contributor for Feministing, I don't see the site getting any better, so I will leave it at that. It's not all bad, but Joes has certainly poisoned my view of them. Finally, allow me to point out that before anyone claims I'm looked for bad articles to comment about, please note that all articles that were on or linked from Feministing was from July 21, 2014, Daily Feminist Cheat Sheet, Jews and Arabs Refuse to Be Enemies, and Against Visibility are literally the first 3 articles I saw. I was going to keep going, but Against Visibility went off the deep end, showing the nasty side of feminism, and made me wish to never return to Feministing. Anyway, I'll check out Feministing next, when I have the time.